Hello and welcome to News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Afghan government and the Taliban negotiators met in Doha to discuss the peace process as violence escalates in Afghanistan amid foreign troops withdrawal. The Tuesday meeting was the first announced gathering of both the sides since mid-May and after talks broke off in April. According to Afghan officials, the warring sides had engaged in intense fighting in 26 out of the country's 34 provinces. 10 deminers were shot dead in northern Baghlan province in the latest attack, yet to be claimed by any group. The UN expert has warned of mass deaths from starvation and disease in Myanmar after attacks by the military forced thousands to flee their homes in Kaya state. In a statement, Tom Andrews called for urgent international action to save the lives of men, women and children. The country plunged into crisis after the military seized power in February. In Pakistan, authorities have decided to open the Walkin coronavirus vaccination facility for all adults from the 11th of June. They have also announced an ease in restrictions amid a decline in cases as the country achieves a milestone of administering 10 million doses of vaccines. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.7 million lives and has infected over 174 million people. US President Joe Biden has revoked Trump's order that sought to ban Chinese social media apps, TikTok and WeChat. He has replaced it with a new security order that could prompt fresh steps to restrict the apps. This comes after China slammed a US bill aimed to boost technology research and production to counter China's tech advancement. And in cricket, Islamabad United are batting against Lahore Qalandars as the 6th edition of the Pakistan Super League resumes in Abu Dhabi. The mega event was suspended in March after a spate of positive COVID-19 tests. Only 14 games were completed in the 34-match tournament. Those were the headlines and detailed stories. Right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Afghan government and the Taliban negotiators met in Doha to discuss the peace process as violence escalates in Afghanistan amid foreign troops withdrawal. The Tuesday meeting was the first announced gathering of both the sides since mid-May and after talks broke off in April. According to Afghan officials, the warring sides are engaged in intense fighting in 26 out of the country's 34 provinces. In Baghlan, 10 deminers were shot dead and 16 injured in an attack on their camp. The Taliban denied involvement in the attack but claimed to have shot down an Afghan army helicopter, killing 3 people on board. However, Afghan defense officials said that the helicopter crashed due to technical failure. The UN expert has warned of mass deaths from starvation and disease in Myanmar after attacks by the military forced thousands to flee their homes in Kaya state. In a statement, Tom Andrews called for urgent international action to save the lives of men, women and children against the military's indiscriminate attacks. The plea came hours after the UN office in Myanmar said the violence in Kaya had displaced an estimated 100,000 people. Myanmar's army has struggled to impose order since seizing power and detaining elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi and other party figures. A rights group says security forces have killed 857 people so far. US President Joe Biden has revoked Trump's order that sought to ban Chinese social media apps, TikTok and WeChat. He has replaced it with a new security order that could prompt fresh steps to restrict the apps. The new executive order also revoked moves that targeted 8 other communications and financial technology software apps. This comes a day after the US Senate passed a bill to counter Beijing's technological advancement. The measure authorizes the use of $190 billion to strengthen US technology and research. China slammed the bill and strongly objected to being cast as an imaginary US enemy. US President Joe Biden has extended sanctions against Belarus by another year. The curbs target 10 Belarusian officials and bar Americans from engaging in any transactions with them. The White House says Belarus's actions pose an extraordinary threat to US national security and foreign policy. Biden slammed Minsk for committing human rights abuses and engaging in public corruption. He said such actions undermine democratic processes and institutions. Meanwhile, President Alexander Lukashenko has signed a law to prison those who insult or protest against the state officials. Syrian Army's air defense system has intercepted an Israeli missile strike over the capital Damascus. State media says the Israeli army launched the attack from over the Lebanese territory. It said the strike caused only material damage. Some Syrian state media outlets said the strikes hit Homs province near Lebanon. The Israeli military has not commented on the matter so far. Israeli forces have arrested 12 Palestinians and shot 3 others across the occupied West Bank. One of the wounded in Tobaz city sustained life-threatening injuries. The Safa village council said Israeli forces raided various areas, smashed doors and ransacked houses. Earlier, Israeli soldiers bulldozed large areas of Palestinians' agricultural lands in the Nablus city to expand an illegal colony. Protests erupted after several army jeeps invaded the area and ransacked homes. Israeli troops fired a barrage of live rounds, rubber-coated bullets, and gas bombs at the protesters in the city. The EU has warned Britain of swift reaction if it changes the post-Brexit trading arrangements for Northern Ireland alone. In a news conference, a senior EU official said trust between Brussels and London must be restored. Maroš Šefčovič called on Britain to abide by its legal obligations and said existing agreements must be kept. He added that the EU will continue to stand by Ireland, which is the most affected member state by Brexit. Earlier, US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said Washington is concerned that UK-EU trade row could endanger peace in Northern Ireland. Britain and the EU are at loggerheads over checks on goods going between Britain and Northern Ireland. In India, the COVID-19 has claimed over 2,200 more lives while infecting more than 92,000 in the past 24 hours. Globally, more than 3.7 million people have died from the virus and over 174 million have been infected so far. More in this report.
As the developing nations struggle to fund COVID-19 inoculations, the World Bank has ruled out support for waiving intellectual property rights for COVID-19 vaccines to help reduce the cost of fighting the pandemic. This comes as World Trade Organization member nations are taking up a proposal to ease patent protections for vaccines. In the US, authorities are scrambling to extend the shelf life of Johnson & Johnson's vaccine as millions of unused surplus doses approach expiration. The country has also eased travel recommendations for more than 110 countries and territories, including Japan, just ahead of the Olympics. In Mexico, students in capital Mexico City returned to school as COVID-19 cases and deaths dip to lowest levels in over a year.
It is a challenge. We have to re-educate our children who used to hug each other and share everything, even food. Today, they cannot share their pencils, their notebook. They cannot give their classmates even a taste of their sandwiches. We all have to learn that this is a new normality. Things have changed.
Uruguay has released data on the impact of Sinovac vaccine that showed it was more than 90% effective. Over in the UK, the number of COVID-19 cases in the past week has increased by 60% as compared to the previous week. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has called on the world to learn from the corona crisis to work in a more sustainable manner.
Das verlangt, dass wir schon jetzt
This requires us thinking about life after Corona, moving out of Corona crisis sustainably, as they call it. This means that we must not content ourselves with somehow returning to pre-Corona situation. We must do everything by using economic and social recovery to live and work more innovatively, more digitally, more resiliently, more environment-friendly, and in short, more sustainably.
Meanwhile, South Africa has put its health minister on special leave over alleged links to a corruption scandal involving coronavirus funding. In African countries, thousands of vaccine doses have been destroyed as they exceeded expiry dates amid lack of medical infrastructure.
In Pakistan, authorities have decided to open the Walkin coronavirus vaccination facility for all adults from the 11th of June. The National Command and Operations Center says the government employees must be fully vaccinated by the end of this month. The directives were issued after a meeting which was chaired by Planning Minister Asad Umar. Earlier, Pakistan reached the figure of administering 10 million vaccine doses, with the virus positivity rate dropping to 2.5%. There have been 77 deaths due to COVID-19 overnight, with the death toll nearing 21,500. China has once again lauded Pakistan's efforts for bringing peace and stability to the region, including Afghanistan. The acknowledgement came during a meeting of Chinese Ambassador Nong Rong with Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa in Rawalpindi. According to military's media wing, the two sides discussed progress on the China-Pakistan economic corridor and latest developments in the Afghan peace process. It said the Army Chief thanked the envoy for the provision of coronavirus vaccines to Pakistan. The death toll from the train accident in the Sindh province has risen to 66. Over 100 injured people are under treatment at different hospitals, and many of them are critical. Officials fear that the death toll may rise. The accident occurred when a passenger train smashed into derailed carriages of another train near Ghotki city on Monday. Initial reports cited the broken welding joint of the track as the cause of the collision. In Indian-occupied Kashmir, a 70-year-old Rohingya woman has died after being in police custody since March. The woman has been identified as Noor Aisha, who was detained in Jammu's Harinagar jail. She was among 200 Rohingya refugees who was detained in March from their camps in Jammu. Authorities said they would be deported to Myanmar. The action has drawn a widespread condemnation from activists and human rights groups. Iraq has released an Iran-aligned militia commander after authorities found insufficient evidence against him. Security forces arrested Qasim Moslei on terrorism-related charges last month from the southern city of Karbala. Officials said at the time the arrest was linked to attacks on U.S. forces stationed in Iraq. His release without prosecution comes as a blow to Iraq's efforts to crack down on armed groups. Moslei commands the Popular Mobilization Forces in Amber province and leads his own faction within the organization. Beijing has criticized Japan and Australia for playing up the China threat and smearing it maliciously. In a press briefing, a foreign ministry spokesperson urged all the sides to stop interfering in China's internal affairs. Wang Wenbin also called on Tokyo and Canberra to stop sabotaging regional peace and stability. This comes after Australia and Japan demanded the access of international observers to Xinjiang. Meanwhile, Canberra has called for a binding dispute settlement system at the World Trade Organization. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said this is important to address economic coercion. Australia is looking to win the support of the G7 nations in its dispute with China. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris says the root causes of migration in Central America will not be fixed overnight. She was talking to reporters at the end of a two-day trip to Guatemala and Mexico. Kamala Harris called for deeper engagement to address why people choose to leave their home countries. Earlier, Harris and Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador agreed to deepen economic ties. Harris and Lopez Obrador also witnessed the signing of an MOU on development agencies working in Central America. The accord is aimed at reducing the number of migrants from Central American countries to the U.S. through Mexico. The meeting follows Harris's Monday visit to Guatemala, where she met President Alejandro Giammattei. In India, at least 17 people have died after a bus collided with a loader vehicle in northern state of Uttar Pradesh. Police say many others were injured in the accident. They say the speeding bus overturned and fell into a ditch in Kanpur Nagar district near Lucknow. Authorities say the passengers got trapped in the wreckage, halting the rescue process. They say the bus from Lucknow was en route to Delhi and carried laborers. In South Korea, at least 9 people have been killed and 8 others injured after a 5-story building collapsed in Gwangju City. Officials said the building collapsed suddenly in the middle of a demolition process. They said concrete from the building fell on a bus carrying 17 people, which led to casualties. Fire agency officials said they were searching for people who might be trapped under the debris. Thousands of Canadians have held vigils to remember a Muslim family killed in London, Ontario. 4 people were run over by a truck in a premeditated hate crime. The victims included 3 women and a man, while the child remains hospitalized with serious injuries. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau joined the mourners as a grieving community stood united amid the crisis. Addressing the mourners in London, Trudeau vowed to take action to dismantle far-right groups.
There are no words that can undo the pain and, yes, the anger of this community. There are no words that can fix the future of that little boy who has had his future taken away. But know this: you are not alone. All Canadians mourn with you and stand with you tonight and always.
The Hong Kong team behind celebrity humanoid robot Sophia is launching a new prototype, Grace. It is designed to interact with the elderly and those isolated by the COVID-19 pandemic. More in this report.
Hi, Grace. Thank you, Sophia.
Dressed in a blue nurse's uniform, Grace has Asian features, collar-length brown hair, and a thermal camera to take your temperature and measure your responsiveness. She uses artificial intelligence to diagnose a patient and can speak English, Mandarin, and Cantonese.
Let's see what your smile looks like. Okay, yeah. Look, or sad. Oh, yes.
I can do all kinds of things for elderly people. I can visit with people and brighten their day with social stimulation, entertain and help guide exercise, but also can do talk therapy, take bio readings and help healthcare providers assess their health and deliver treatments.
Grace's resemblance to a healthcare professional and capacity for social interaction is aimed at relieving the burden of frontline hospital staff overwhelmed during the pandemic.
Such socially isolated individuals during COVID, with a lot of negative thoughts and the mental states, if they can get help through deployment of these social robots in their intimate settings, I think certainly it has a positive impact in the society. So yes, I think we have been fundamentally and forever changed as a world due to COVID.
Awakening Health has announced mass production of a beta version of Grace by August. Officials say the cost of making the robots, now akin to luxury car pricing, will decrease once the company is manufacturing tens or hundreds of thousands of units.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. And now the business updates. China's factory gate prices for goods have increased at their fastest pace since September 2008. Data from the National Bureau of Statistics show the producer price index surged 9% year-on-year in May. The figure beats the average of an 8.2% increase forecast. Beijing's PPI had already seen a higher than expected year-on-year increase of 6.8% in April. The surge in index follows recovering domestic and global demand. Meanwhile, the consumer price index also posted a year-on-year increase of 1.3% in May. However, it fell short of the market estimation of 1.6%. The leaders of the European Union and the US are set to commit to lifting steel tariffs before December 1 this year. The draft statement prepared for a June 15 summit in Brussels aims to avoid any further transatlantic trade disputes. The draft also commits to ending a long-running spat over subsidies to aircraft makers before July 11. The US imposed a record $7.5 billion in tariffs on European goods in October 2019. EU retaliated by slapping $4 billion in tariffs on US goods in November last year. A Paris court has indicted a French car maker Renault for deception over a diesel emissions probe launched in 2017. The investigation followed a report pointing out high level of emissions in violation with the Euro standards. The court directed Renault to pay a deposit of 20 million euros, including 18 million for damages and fines. It also asked the group to provide a bank guarantee of 60 million euros in cash as compensation. The auto giant refuted the indictment, saying its vehicles comply with approved laws and regulations. Several car makers in Europe have come under scrutiny since the Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal. The US stocks have edged up, with investors awaiting fresh cues from inflation data this week. The tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite opened nearly 0.33% higher, while the S&P 500 rose over 0.1% higher at open. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Index also landed in the positive category, opening 0.1% higher. Meanwhile, oil prices rose on signs of strong fuel demand in Europe. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.